There's a third podcast that's brand new, which I love promoting. My wife, soon-to-be wife, who's sick upstairs. She was sitting in. She sat in on a couple of episodes of the Atheist Experience when people didn't show up, and it wasn't. She also did a couple episodes of the nonprofits. You know, I mean, it's right there in the house, so she sits in and she'll occasionally chime in. And one day we were doing an episode, and we got to the end of the hour, and I had stuff to do. And I was like, okay, that's it. Dennis, go ahead and wrap this up. And Dennis does his outro. And we, boom, click, close the podcast, and everybody leaves, and she's looking at me going, I had stuff to say. It was important stuff. And it was legitimate important. And I didn't even realize. I mean, she just kind of expected that she was going to get to say it, and I expected she'd tell me that she wanted to say it. So she formed a new podcast that afternoon. If you haven't listened to it, you really should. It's called Godless Bitches. And it's Beth, Jen, Tracy, Linnea on occasion. It is focused primarily on women's issues, feminist issues, from a secular perspective. They've done 8 episodes now. Interviewed Vicki Garrison, who's a former cripple, Angie Jackson, who was raised in a cult, and they've covered topics ranging from sex, modesty, and last week, female genital mutilation and circumcision. So these are some scary, godless bitches, and they are. I love it. I haven't had a chance to listen to the last episode. I do the tech stuff, but they record it while I'm having my board game night for the UC at our house. No, it's very smart.
Oh, okay. We don't actually want to let anybody.
Sorry, what?
No, it's not live.
No, you can't call my wife. I'll give you the room number. So, in the process of doing the show for the last 6 years, I've kind of been fortunate to be in a which you'll see a number of professional atheists. I can't count myself among them until I'm actually like getting paid who will do debates. I've had a lot of trouble finding people to debate. I did one debate in last year on morality.
I'm surprised the recording's
Orthodox priests. Did anybody see it? The debate? Yeah. Okay. I won't be exaggerating, and all of these people can confirm. It was a nice, pleasant debate where we talked past each other for quite a while, where he said some of the most nonsensical things I've ever heard anybody say, tried to put me in the category of, oh, here's all these atheists who are amoral, and then there's Matt. I'm this special type of atheist, and was pleasant, and then in his closing remarks, that I would not have been able to respond to had it not been for the Q&A afterwards, lost his frickin' mind, and went on a rant about pornography and Hitler and how atheism necessarily leads to genocide. None of this was even hinted at during any of these other discussions. It was like surreal. And the funniest thing, because I don't really look at it as, who I won or you won, but I mean, we can. I won. I heard him do an interview on some Orthodox radio program shortly thereafter. And I had been traveling around the country for 2 years talking about the superiority of secular morality. It was one of, I don't like to give the same lecture over and over. This is one that I made an exception for because it was important, because I put a lot of work into it. And it's my ideas, for those who haven't seen that, are very similar to what Sam Harris puts out in The Moral Landscape, which is when I stopped giving the talk, I was like, read the book, it's going to be easier. But he's on this radio program afterwards, and they're talking about how he just wiped the floor with me, and the host of the show goes, yeah, it seemed like he really just wasn't prepared and hadn't given this issue of morality much thought. I won't say anything bad.
Well, and the interesting thing about that is that there are so many kids who hear this interview, they will actually go and watch the debate. They just don't. It's that long. And we actually got an email from somebody earlier this week that said, I think that the debate is
maybe they were talking about the guy who was calling in and telling me to listen to Chris Langman. I don't know. Some people think I'll lose the debate anytime I hang up. I guess we're going to pass one of these mics out and start questions here in just a couple seconds. But I want to talk about, this is a bit of an anecdote, but I think differently perhaps than a lot of other people. I talked about it a little bit at Oklahoma Free Thought Convention, and a little bit at Iowa. There's a picture of a girl and a jackass, and they look like they're screaming at each other, and it's this internet argument. My kind of standard thing is that, this is amusing, but I tend to look at that and say, hey, somebody took that picture. And it reminds me that there's always somebody watching what we're doing. One of the reasons why I do what I do on the show is I'm not necessarily trying to convince the person on the other end of the phone as much as someone to get information to people around. So there's always somebody potentially paying attention to whatever you're doing, which is both good and bad, because there's plenty of examples of me doing things out there that which people probably haven't seen. But I was, we are all morons, by the way. We are all idiots. We are all stupid about something, sometime, perhaps all the time. I doubt anybody in here thinks they're the exception. So I'm very much preaching to the choir, but for some reason, when I point out when there's somebody who's going into the show who's making a particularly stupid argument, and I get to the point where I will actually point out that, yes, in fact, you're an idiot, and the facts will bear me out on this, there are people who are like, oh, you shouldn't do that. I mean, you just sacrificed the high ground. No, I didn't sacrifice any high ground. There are people who are willing to hold up their end of a conversation and make it productive at a college points and keep it moving, and those people get 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes on the show without fail. People tend to get as good as they get. When I call somebody a moron and then eventually hang up on them, I'm not assessing their entire character, and I'm not belittling them. I'm talking about this situation, they're being stupid, and I fully admit that I am the same, that we are all prone to making assumptions. We are really, one of the most awesome things about the human mind is that it relies a lot on inference and induction, which are very unreliable, but they're just reliable enough. Today is pretty much like yesterday for the most part. And if you see this action occur, and you know that it occurred because, if I drop my pen and it falls, and we see this over and over again, it's one of the reasons why magic and things tend to surprise people, because it breaks past that barrier. No, I'm not going to be able to float this. I didn't prepare. I may do something else later if there's time, but it breaks past that barrier. And so we rely on inference induction, and we basically brainwash ourselves. We are taught by our parents at a level of indoctrination. We are also indoctrinated by our society. There's kind of a vicious circle going on there. Some of you might have heard me mention this yesterday on the Magic Sandwich Show. And if you were at the SSA thing, you're going to know what I'm getting ready to say. The other day on the drive home, we were getting ready to head up here to, hey, there's Richard. Do you want to come introduce us? Oh, never mind.
That's Matt. He's a crazy SOB, that's all I got to do. And his fiance or wife can outdrink anyone in this hotel. Period. Period. No, I'm just coming to listen to you.
No. She actually did not drink very much last night, and she is legitimately sick. Believe me.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, we train ourselves. And we're, like I said, we're really good with inference and induction, and we kind of fall into patterns. And the other day I was at Wendy's picking up food to get home real quick because we had a pack for this. And I'm sitting in the drive-thru, I make my order, I give the guy at the window my $20 bill, and his partner at the window hands me back some food, and then he comes back and hands me the change and says, have a nice day, thank you. And I said, I'm supposed to have a drink. And he looks at me in befuddlement, and then leans out a little to look in the car, and says, "Oh, hang on, I'll get your drink." And he goes off to get the drink. And I'm sitting there going, wow, that's just a shining example. I mean, he's so in his little system that he just can't believe for a second that the system failed, when we all know that drive-thrus fail all the time. And I'm sitting there thinking about this going, this is a good example that I can talk about at the event. And he hands me the drink, and I set it down, and I said, I'm going to need a straw. And he looks at me and he goes, it should be in the bag. And I said, yeah, and the drink should have been here a minute ago. Because I'm an asshole. And I so wanted him to be wrong, because if there wasn't a straw in the bag, then there would be 2 points of data that might make him actually question their process and fix it. But he was right, the straw was in the bag. So what ended up happening is this error gets completely lost. His assumptions go right back to where they were. He's had confirmation, and now he's got data that he was right. And I'm driving off, because this is the way my mind works, and I'm just fuming, you know. Not that I didn't get my drink, but that, why are people so stupid? Why do we do this? And then I realized I didn't check to make sure the drink was right. I didn't check to make sure he gave me the right change. I just made all the same assumptions he did and drove off mad at him. We are all guilty of this all the time. And that's the most important thing that I think anybody can learn. Because the difference between this is going to be a long part. The difference between me and a lot of people that actually fall is that I recognize this, and I'd like to freaking change it. I want to find the areas where I'm wrong and correct them. And I want to find the processes that lead me to be wrong and try to correct those as much as I can, too. So thanks for visiting the Atheist Experience. Who's our first caller? Cowards. Come on. You want a mic? We'd just like to, Jeffrey, help us out.
All right, so I listened to your analysis of Phil's place, don't be a dick.
Yeah, he's wrong.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I listened to your analysis of Phil's place, don't be a dick speech.
Yeah, he's wrong.
Yeah, I know. I'm nonprofit, and I listen to a lot of podcasts. Your signal to noise ratio is really, really high. But I remember being really disappointed I didn't hear anything like that I could grab onto. And I think Phil played completely wrong as well. But all I heard from the podcast was, you don't know what he was trying to say. That's it.
Yeah, because
I didn't hear you say he's wrong. I didn't hear anybody say he's wrong. Nobody said there's room for both positions.
Okay, to be fair, I don't know, is everybody familiar with Phil's Don't Be a Dick talk from TAM a couple years ago? For those who aren't, really briefly, Phil Plate gave this talk at the Amazing Meeting, which is probably the premier skeptics event. And he basically, the talk was don't be a dick. And he didn't call anybody out by name. He didn't give any examples of any sort of behavior that he thought was dickish. He just said, hey, we're going to probably catch more flies with, honey than vinegar, which by the way is false. And we should be nice to these people because we were all there. He's basically saying the same thing that I am, that we are all stupid about something, and that we should be compassionate and caring and try to educate people. Completely agree. But when he comes out to do this don't be a dick thing and doesn't tell anybody, refuses to give examples of what behavior he finds dickish, Phil's being a dick. I mean, that's just a fact. Because there are many of us within the community who have a pretty good idea of what we think he's talking about. But we don't know. We don't know if he's talking about the guy who posts a comment on YouTube, which, by the way, I don't ever read. But I realize that some of those people are just vile, unhelpful, Or is he talking about me on the show, getting riled up and arguing with somebody? Is he talking about PZ? I mean, there were people who immediately assumed he was talking about PZ, who's like the nicest guy you're ever going to meet. And I've never seen him get angry with anybody. He's got razor-sharp claws on the blog, but they slice to the point, and we're always addressing a point. And the fallout from this, as it went on, was people made a lot of comments about the talk. I wasn't in town that year. I didn't get to go. And the funny thing is, I have some minions that I send out into the world. Some of my friends were at TAM and called me and emailed me right off the bat saying, "Oh, you should have sent here. Heard what Phil said. You'd have lost your shit." And I was like, okay, well, what did he say? And it turned out he really didn't say much of anything. And when they posted the full version of it, I wrote a quick blog post showing what I agreed with, what I didn't agree with, but then I would really like examples that this is kind of absurd. You know, are you just tilting at windmills? You know, is this problem? Because he thinks this is a problem within the skeptical community. Does this problem actually exist? If it does, give me some evidence, demonstrate it. What it ended up doing was supporting kind of an accommodationist view that we should play nice and agree to disagree, and I won't, because I give a shit. Because beliefs matter. They inform our actions have consequences to ourselves and others. None of us lives in a vacuum, and what my neighbor believes affects what they do and affects my life. If that weren't true, none of us would be bothering to do any of this stuff. And the thing that irked me about Phil is that he linked to my blog post in one of his everybody's all riled up about my don't be a dick speech. And it was like, he linked to several, and my blog post was the only one that he had some comment on. And he kept referring to me as the author. The author of this post, the author of this post, the author of this post hasn't even, wasn't even at hand, you can see it. And I'm like, well, how dickish is that? I mean, we're not friends. We have met once, and maybe it's possible he has no clue who I am, but my name is on the blog post. So this pretentious, the author thing, yeah, I still love Phil. I love him for his science stuff. I'm a little irritated at the end. That's a long answer to a really simple question.
Yeah, regarding this advice to basically not be a dick, when in the course of history has any group pursuing civil rights been granted their basic civil rights because they played nice and went to the majority room and maybe there's civil rights there? You know? History, women's suffrage, for example, it wasn't women sitting around wringing their hands in their homes and saying, oh, gee, this was totally awesome. Maybe it was nice, the guys will let us live. That didn't happen. They went to the street, got arrested. Susan B. Anthony voted. And they, she was sentenced to jail. And they said, okay, you don't have to go to jail, you can be fine with dead, just like not paying fine in. And, got that. I mean, think about it. Where would we be if a bunch of drag queens had gotten pissed off one night and said, screw this, when the cops come and beat us, we're going to fight back. And that's how it works. We're sort of in the growing phase right now. We haven't learned that lesson quite yet as a movement. But you don't get your basic civil rights by playing nice, by playing by the rules. Then the majority who's trying to restrict your rights, they just set those rules. We're not playing. Not by those.
And I'll point out, I don't know who's got the next question, I'll point this out when we're funding the next one. I think I am nice. Thanks for laughing at that. Fuck you guys. Like I said early on, I try to make sure nobody's a harsher critic about the show and me than I am. And when I leave the show on the drive to El Arroyo, I revisit it and I could have said this, oh, I should have said that, I wish I hadn't done that. I really hung up on that guy too soon, or that person talked too long. And as long as I'm getting email from people, as we do, it's my mind's been changed because of what I've seen on the show. I used to be, now I can say we receive calls from people who are Muslim, Hindu, Christian, of various denominations, who are now atheists because of what they saw on the show, in part. There's a lot of there's one, the name I won't give out. There's a lot of people who are kind of in the middle, or they're atheists, or the agnostics that I beat up on all the time. Sorry if you're here, love you. Who are now outspoken atheists and advocates because they actually, care more about what's going on. There's one email in particular that I got about a year and a half ago, I think, and it was a guy who sent me an email and said, I won't tell you my name, but I used to call your show 2 or 3 years ago regularly, and I hated you with a passion, and I wanted to kick your ass, and I thought you were up there spouting lies, and I would call and harass you on the show, and I just kept watching, even when I stopped calling. And eventually, stuff started to make sense, and I realized that I was wrong. And I won't tell you my name, but I wanted you to know that even somebody who you had some of the most antagonistic arguments with, it has now, their mind's been changed. And while I'm not ready to be an outspoken advocate of atheism, secularism, etc., I'm not the asshole that I used to be. And I was like, that's awesome. Please tell me your name. Because how can I go around and talk about, sure, you got that email. I can show you the email, but I can't tell you his name. But yeah, it does work. And it's one of the reasons why I get so frustrated when I hear people say, oh, you're not going to change people's minds. People don't change their minds. It's just too difficult. I'm walking, talking proof of it. I was a fundamentalist Christian for years. I know it can happen. This is the reason I do this. We get email. We know it works. And that's the other reason that I don't like a saying that I heard again last night, which is you can't reason somebody out of something or believe that they didn't reason their way into. That's bullshit. You can't do it every time, right away on your first effort. But reason wins. Reality wins. We're winning, by the way. We are absolutely winning. There's no doubt about it. Church attendance is down. Attendance at conventions like this is going up. Student groups are growing like crazy. Religions are scrambling. But that doesn't mean that they're like tossing in their last throws. They have tons and tons and tons of money and a system that has been in place for years that encourages participation and volunteering and donating, as we heard from Dillahunty just a little bit ago. We've got a lot of work to do, but we're winning. And even if we weren't winning, I'd be sitting up here saying we're definitely going to win, because I can't even fathom the idea that reality could ever lose out. I have more confidence in the abilities of, all of us than any religion has. Because religions think people are weak and that they need some sky daddy invisible governor. But I want to get some more calls. Who's the next caller? What's your name?
I'm Pete.
Hey, Pete, welcome to the Atheist Experience.
Oh, hi, man. It's great to be calling.
Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Boulder, Colorado.
Really?
Yeah.
In the second row, that's cool.
Yeah. Just to pour out my group, we're the Secular Student Skeptic Society in Boulder, Colorado. www.ssaff.org. Check it out. Anyway, one of the most common criticisms I get from Christians, online and over occasionally face-to-face, they keep on asking, why are you only taking on Christians? Or if they're Muslims sometimes, why are you only taking on Muslims? I know that, the biggest reason is because their stuff is the most prominent in the news and stuff, but I'm wondering, are you guys aware of anything that, lesser religions are doing that we should be talking about or bringing up in these kind of conversations?
Not so much in this country. I think it's much more of an issue in other countries. But, we, on the atheist experience, be able to spare anybody who's useful news. We've gotten emails from people saying, hey, why don't you talk about the Jews and the news now? We've actually covered all of those at some point on the show. It's just that those religious groups don't have the political power that Christians have. And that's by design. If you look at the history of communism and this fundamentalist movement that started way back when, you can see that they carefully cultivated this political power. And they're actually losing partial power. If you look at the number of public policies that are being made based on who's religious beliefs, and you don't have to look any further than Texas. Scientification, health education, all kinds of stuff. You even got faith-based climatology. But I will point out that you notice that the governor prayed for rain in no rain fell. The atheists have a convention in Houston, and it starts raining, and it's raining in Texas.
Also, if there's any doubt about our powers over the weather versus the governor's, we had our annual bat cruise last Saturday. We've never been rained out for this. We've never even had any remote chance that we were going to be rained out for it. But after the hottest summer on record, we had a beautiful, cool Saturday night, clear skies. Clearly, God wanted us to see bats. My God is clearly different from Rick Perry's. The other reason... I posted a thing on Twitter and Facebook the other day that people send us stuff all the time, and please do. I'm 980 some odd emails behind at the moment, and that won't change. There's just no way I can get to all of them. Don't feel bad if you don't get an answer. But we do take the news bits, and one of the news bits that I posted the other day was a young girl who was killed during, they're calling it a Buddhist exorcism because it's the rough equivalent of it. There are Buddhist sects who have supernatural beliefs like this. There's also, we talk more on the nonprofits about a lot of these news stories because it's news-based. The reason we don't talk about other religions so much on the atheist experience is because they don't call. If a Muslim, a Hindu, Buddhist, whatever would call, I'd be happy to talk to them and explain, tell me why you believe and why. Maybe I agree, maybe I don't. But yeah, we're predominantly Christian, and that's just the way it's going to be. Plus, it's kind of our area of expertise. I mean, I'm much more knowledgeable about the Bible than the Quran. It's just the way it's going to be, and I'm not going to change that. My process of moving religion, that I want to be the best Christian I can be. I'm going to study, I'm going to pray, I'm going to find the best arguments to convince the godless heathen friends of mine. And so I read a lot of atheist stuff to find out what I was up against. Changed my mind. I'm like Ben Franklin. Ben Franklin said that quote that some books in opposition to deism he came across, and in reading them, he found that the deistic arguments much more convincing than the standard Christian arguments, and so he became a deist. And pretty much the same thing happened. I read, Strobel and McCall and stuff, and as long as you're still believing, that stuff's very convincing. As long as you don't scrape below the surface. And then as soon as you read, like, Farrell Tills or Jeffrey J. Lauder's responses to those, by the way, all that stuff's available at infidels.org. You can't believe that anymore. And so my next thing was, okay, well, I'm not a Christian. Let me investigate all of these other religions and these other gods, because clearly one of them's got to be right. Spoiler alert, no, that's not. It quickly became obvious that I couldn't possibly spend the rest of my life. I could spend more than my life studying all these various religions. Why would I do that? And by the way, I went to what kind of God could exist. And so I studied the bigger questions, and I studied, the philosophy of it, a lot of skepticism, logical fallacies, and everything else. And then I began to just sort of say, okay, it's possible that none of these religions are right, but if there was some kind of God, what kind of God could exist, and which ones would matter? Because the gods that don't manifest in any way, they're indistinguishable from the gods that don't exist. So maybe there is a God that's hiding from everybody, but how would you know? How did anybody ever even come up with I'm worshiping this particular God, but he's the invisible dragon in the garage from Satan. You can't prove that he doesn't exist, but it doesn't matter because it doesn't manifest in reality anyway. And we should only care about the things that manifest in reality, because those are the only things that we can actually identify. And so I started thinking about the character of God. Well, what kind of God would this be? Would this be a God that Well, I was still thinking with my kind of Christian mind and, thinking about afterlives. Well, what would be